Hey guys, Dirty H here and welcome back to Europe in Detail. So check it out guys, we built this amazing bridge in this episode. We also put down a heap more buildings and do some pretty sweet detailing, so let's get into it. I asked a couple of really prominent asset creators, one of them being Armesto, if they were interested in making this bridge for me, but unfortunately he's not taking any commissions anymore, so I've decided to make it out of props. And if we take a look at it in real life, I've got my work cut out for me here. You can see there's really nothing simple about the design. It's not perfectly symmetrical either, but I don't think I'll be getting that carried away. But you'll basically just see me cycle through various props here until I find the right ones, and most of them are procedural objects so that I can change the color and shape. But not only is this bridge a massive visual part of Ronda, it's also got a really cool history. So this bridge is actually the second bridge. The first bridge collapsed in the 1700s, killing about 50 odd people, which would have been horrific, I'd imagine. And the second one was built here a short time after, and that second bridge here that we're building was even used as a prison for a short amount of time, with stories of the guards even threatening the prisoners with death from being thrown out the window, all the way down into the very shallow river at the bottom. And now they do tours through this old bridge, or the old part of the bridge where it was a prison, so I'm going to look to try and include that in our city as well. So at this point of our build, I'm trying to map out where the arches go, the three main arches, and then I'm using just a brick stair for the main column of the bridge, and I've tried to tint it a sort of browny colour that's close to the bridge in real life. Then I can use these stairs to extend these columns all the way down and into the water at the bottom. And I'm going to eventually narrow this river, but for now it looks a bit wide. Because I'm using these stairs to make the column, I have to flip them upside down and fill them in so that they make a complete square. So I'll go through and do that next very carefully, and then we can move on to the next part of the bridge. So now I have the basic shape of the bridge. I can swing through and do things like add surface networks to these exposed pieces of the bridge so that I can add decals and stuff to it. I also start adding in some of the smaller touches like the little wee arches here and there. Then the decals can go down, and I'm using Ronix's coastal decals because it sort of looks like blowing sand is just sitting on parts of the bridge type of thing, and it's a little bit overgrown in places as well, because once the cliffs and the trees go in, you'll see that some of the trees are hanging over the bridge and dropping a few leaves around the place. So now we can pop down to the bottom and carry on. And what I'm going to try and do down here is squeeze the river down a little bit narrower with some rocks and stuff like that, and shape it up so that we can put a bit of a waterfall in here, because in real life it has a really beautiful waterfall here. Admittedly the one that I'm making doesn't really look too much like it, but that's okay, we're only using it as inspiration, and this becomes a really cool little picturesque area down here. I've also decided to use the rocks with the grass or the moss on the top, and with these I just turn them into procedural objects and squeeze them down, spin them around, and make it look like that river's a bit more narrow here, and also include a few more rocks here to bank it up. And a couple of things that I make sure I do in terms of those rocks being placed is I don't really want to be able to see the joins, and I don't want to blow them up too much with procedural objects because we start getting pretty dodgy looking textures. And it's also really important that we stick with that Adrid colour that I've chosen and stored in the PO colour function. This really sets the cliffs apart from, say, Borgovino, and yeah, it just really helps reinforce that sort of burnt Spanish look to the earth. And in fact there's actually parts of the cliff that are pretty much just dirt, not so much rock, but that's very difficult, or I've found it difficult at least, to try and replicate in City Skylines, because it is vertical or very near vertical, but yeah, it very much looks like it's just layered dirt. So I would have loved to have been able to nail that, but nevertheless I'm very happy with how it's turned out, and I guess the colour that I've chosen for these rocks is sort of substituting for that dirt not being there as well. So you can see here I'm starting to bank up and shape up these rocks so that I can get this waterfall in place and make it look like it's sort of, you know, sitting there naturally. And it took a fair bit of time to get these rocks in the right place, and I had to squeeze them and scale them and do all sorts of funky things, but I got there in the end. You can also see here off to the right of the screen where the flat rocks are with the sort of grass look on top. Later on I want to have some little walkways that come down into there and include some trails, so there is a chance I'm going to modify this, or it's pretty much inevitable I'm going to modify this later on, but just enough to get those trails in hopefully. So anyway, you can see here I'm putting the waterfall in, which is the real fun part, and Kamanogi's waterfall prop is perfect here, so I've chosen a little wee triangle version of it and placed it in a few times to make a larger version of it essentially. So the last bit to complete on the bridge is there's a little wee archway at the bottom here, and this one looks a little bit more run down. There's some scrubby stuff growing on the top and it's a bit sort of overgrown, and again I experiment with a few different arches, but I think I just used the same one from the top in the end, all one very similar. So I use PO on that to get it to fit pretty snug in the little gap that I've left here. And then I can use some surface networks, some grass surface networks in particular, on the top, so that we can put some prop bushes and stuff up there and a few decals and really start to make this thing look like it is a bit overgrown and stuff. And now with this 95% complete, it looks really cool with the narrow river flowing through underneath and all the overgrown stuff around, and of course the beautiful waterfall. Yeah, I'm really proud of this little build, I love it. So drop me a comment guys and let me know what you guys think. So now I get to put the first buildings right up against this cliff edge, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about doing this. I knew when I finished making the cliffs that these buildings were going to look fantastic right up against this cliff edge, so let's get stuck into this. In real life there looks to be some sort of hotel or something like that here, but that's exactly what we're going to do anyway, put a hotel in, and we're going to include some really cool pools right out by the cliffside, and some actual functioning walkways going right through the whole area with some service cubes stuffed in here and there to get some people in there. I used some old looking stone retaining walls and some grass surface networks to complete the surface up to the cliff, and this is where our functioning path is going to come through, right on this edge here. So that path is going to run off the road here, right on the edge of the Puente Nuevo bridge we just built. You can also see some little prop stairs that I've put in here, and these are going to become functional later on with a little tour that goes down to the bridge. And as we move along the cliffside, I just finished the area off with trees and bushes, little planters, some decals here and there with some old paved areas. I want to really show some age as well if I can. So for instance, I'm using a ground decal with like little bits of grass coming up between the pavers so that it looks like the pavers have been there for a long time. And this whole area when it's finished looks really beautiful next to the bridge. So now I carry on building a bit further along the cliff, and I have to get some roading out here to get access for these buildings. I want to keep as many buildings functioning as I can, which means of course having good road access. In saying that, I want to keep the roadways minimal, especially around here. I want to jam as many buildings in around here as I can. And there is a building around this area here in real life that is very unique, and I believe it needs to go in pretty much now or before any other buildings go around this area, so that it's in the right place to begin with. But check out this really cool Bullring. It's from the same creator that creates all of the Spanish assets, High Explosive Serenade. And I'm so pleased that this was on the workshop, because this is a big part of the aesthetics of Ronda, and it just looks great sitting here, it really does. So with that down, we can start laying in a few more buildings, and I want to put a few more hotels around here. So you'll see a few more high rises. They're a little bit more modern, but we're also going to see a fair amount of commercial around here. Pretty much low commercial, because there is some around here in real life, but a lot of these buildings are also multi-use in real life, which is pretty impossible to do with the vanilla city skylines unless you want a whole bunch of complaining and eventually dead citizens. But anyhow, I've squeezed these buildings together pretty tightly, and I'm also trying to create some space between them so that we can have an entrance into the Bullring. And also there's quite a lot of open plaza style courtyards in the front of these commercial areas in Ronda, so we're going to look to capture that as well. So here I'm trying to create my own mixed-use buildings. So the back of the hotel here, which is actually, I'm pretty sure it's a university that I've turned off, but I love the building. I'm trying to make this roadside here into low commercial buildings, and eventually I put like a little orange roof on each one of these shops, so it looks like it's a part of the building that we're half plonking these into. And most of these shops are just fashion places. I think there's a couple of food shops, and I'm also going to put some markets out here and make them look sort of a little bit rugged and like they've sort of been set up quickly, just to try and add a little bit of character to the area. So I'm also starting to get quite the demand for industrial or offices, so you'll see me put a few cube services in some of these shops and just try and meet that demand. You'll also see me use node controller to widen the road a little bit here, because I want to include like a really nice flower bed sort of planter in the middle of the road. And this is following Ronda as well. They have these like planters in the middle of the road in this area in particular, and it comes out looking really nice. I put some little yellow flowers in it with like a hedge pattern on a 45-degree angle, and yeah, it adds a really nice little touch to the road here. I want to make a point of filling out at least one or two of these blocks per episode. There's going to be a handful of blocks here in the middle of Ronda that are just going to be basically residential. There's going to be nothing too particular about them. And for me to stick to my original plan of being able to move on to the next town within 5 or 6 episodes, I'm really going to have to haul ass. I'm going to have to fill out these blocks, pretty quick smart. So before I start putting these buildings down, you'll notice that I run a couple of paths through, pretty much cutting through the block on a 45. And there's a couple of reasons why I do this. Number one is Ronda in real life has roads on this type of angle, but I have refrained from doing that within this game because It doesn't really like going on these really strange little angles, the roads. So I've decided to use the pedestrian paths instead. And the second reason is this is actually really needed in game. With some of these blocks being really odd shapes, these paths can actually cut the walking distance down by up to half, so hopefully they get lots of use. So in the act of doing that, I have created some very tight angles that I now have to try and get buildings to fit around, and this is very important for the aesthetics of this little town we're building here. Our little Spanish town here is already looking like nothing I've ever built before. I would like to start to include some custom builds in this, and maybe some things that are not in real life. So if you guys may have any suggestions in that regard, hit me up in the comments please, I'd love to hear them. What do you think this little town needs? Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed that episode. I'd very much appreciate a thumbs up from you, and if you don't subscribe, please consider it, I'd love that too, and I will hopefully see you guys on the next episode of Europe in Detail. See you later guys.